Do you think is the highlight of everyone's day today? This session or the game this evening?
I'm going to throw out there it's probably the game. I'm not saying
Let's
this is.
try. Let's try and make this more exciting than the game.
I don't know how to do that. I can do a dance, but no one will want to see it.
I don't know. We can save that for the end. Everyone, if you stay until the end, Nathan will do a dance.
We'll not be doing a dance. Awesome. I think we can crack on. We obviously sent the recording out afterwards. So yeah, here we go. Thank you everybody for joining us on this very, very toasty Wednesday. Um, for those of you that have joined us in the past, we are a company called Scede. We've been running this webinar series for a while now, and it's been really exciting journey. We've been able to do public speaking with a number of our partners, and today's the one I've actually been really excited for a long time. So I'm joined today by Nick from Canditech, which is essentially like an assessment platform, but Nick's going to go through a lot more because it is a hell of a lot more than what I've just described it as, and that's a short little sentence. So we'll do a brief little round of introductions. Then I'll hand over to Nick to go through some of the talking points today. So my name is Nathan Keighley. I've been in TA now for a depressingly long time, so it's about 16 years. I spent 10 years in investment banks and hedge funds before moving to sort of insure tech and tech companies. For the last 2 years, I've been running a advisory function with Scede, and Scede are a embedded talent consultancy. So we're definitely sort of the new wave of providing support to customers. So it's not just the RPO model or the agency model. Embedded means you have recruiters on site that are fully a part of your company. They stand by your values and they attend your stand-ups. And it's there for either additional support or for upgrading the talent function that you have already. Nick, hand over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Nathan, thank you for having us onto the session today. I'm Nick. I'm the Director of Customer Success at Canditech, so primarily responsible for ensuring that all of our customers get value from their partnership with us. So I spend most of my time talking with TA teams about the best way to embed skills-based hiring into their process. I've been in TA for about 16 years. I spent the first 10 years as a recruiter myself, and the last 6 within HR tech, really focused on top of funnel sourcing challenges across the UK, the US, India, and EMEA more broadly. Canditech, for anyone who doesn't know, is a skills-based assessment platform. We help companies see who can do the job before they get the job. And we do that by allowing companies to run job simulations, which effectively means giving candidates tasks that mimic the work of the role they're applying to see if they have the skills and ability to perform in that position. If I can flip over to the next slide. So we're going to be talking a lot about skills-based hiring today, particularly how to evaluate AI skills. This is really what 95% of the conversations that I'm having with teams is around today. It's top of mind for pretty much everyone in TA at the moment. Just for people who aren't aware exactly of what skills-based hiring is, skill-based hiring is a recruitment method to evaluate candidates based on their ability to perform a role rather than traditional signals such as previous employer, previous job title, education level, certifications. And there's a lot of ways that you can run skills-based hiring. Skill assessments is one of those, with job simulations as part of that. But then you could also do things like skills mapping, competency-based interviews. You could review certifications. There's lots of different ways to embed skills-based hiring. But today we'll be really focused on skill assessments and job simulations with that focus on AI.
I will say as well from my first-hand experience of running teams, both within sort of large enterprise customers and then also within the startup scale-up spaces, is one of the big problems I have had, especially, it's not exclusively to, but especially with tech teams within companies, is the sort of standardized assessments Irish been doing for numbers of years, right? I worked with really awesome European-based tech scale-up a few years ago. And they were essentially sending for data engineers a Python assignment of like how to build a calculator. And I was like, okay, what does this have to do with the job, right? And before having a tool kind of like Canditech, there are other type of testing platforms, not to mention the names, but these were all very quite generic based testings. And the only way that we found a way to get over this hurdle of actually giving the people who are potentially joining the business an actual opportunity to, one, experience the work that they would be doing in the job, but also two, actually fairly assessing them on the work they would actually be doing in the job, is we would have to run these quite long sessions of introducing them to the code, giving them code examples of the product itself, which I can tell you now, some of the companies I've worked with in the past would not be comfortable with providing because some of it may be proprietary code. But the real shift towards actual skills-based hiring will more so, and sort of job simulations especially, for someone like me that's worked with the companies I work with for the amount of years I've worked with, is quite a big change, which is why we partnered with Canditech. Like, this is such actually a big development compared to what I've had to sort of struggle with for the last sort of 16 years. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk and share a little bit more about what you guys do.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. And actually, it's a really good point because a lot of companies that we speak to, they have experienced exactly what you're speaking about, where it's been traditionally really difficult to deploy skills-based hiring across an organization, really because it would require so much time from the hiring managers who are the experts to go and build the assessments, score the assessments. And it got to a point, I'd imagine, where most companies said, let us just meet the candidate. We don't have time for all of this set up in the background. But then you're introducing a lot of subjectivity into the process. We work with some of the biggest companies in the world, publicly listed companies like Deloitte, Ernst& Young, Monday.com, Wix, Fiverr, all the way through to startups, scale-ups. And with the introduction of generative AI, you can now deploy customized skill assessments literally within 20 minutes from getting a brief from a hiring team without having the hiring manager have to be so actively involved in that full process. So you can give candidates those stimulations where you can get that, predictive nature about their ability to perform that particular role. So we'll definitely cover some of that in the session today as well. If I just flip over to this next slide, one of the really interesting shifts that we've seen recently is our clients' attitude towards AI. When AI first came into the fold, most of our customers said, hey, we need to build proctoring features to stop candidates using AI because it was considered cheating. And they wanted to know if candidates were trying to do anything within AI and not solving the challenges independently. But as we advocate for job simulations, which means building out tasks that mimic the role, and as most roles now require AI utilization, it makes more sense to allow candidates to use AI within an assessment, but in a way that's controlled. So you can understand how they can utilize these tools to become more productive, more efficient, expand their thinking in a way that you're able to review that when you're looking at their completed assessment. The way that we solve that, and I'll show a bit more about this when we jump into the platform, is actually by embedding AI directly into assessments, and you can allow the candidate to work through challenges. But one of the main things that companies ask me about at the moment is AI fluency more broadly. And this is in relation to pretty much every job function, because you might, of course, be a developer who's doing something like vibe coding in a cursor type environment, and you need to understand AI, but all the way through to people in customer service who are using AI now to refine email communication, or marketers using AI to build out marketing plans, or salespeople for prospecting research and prospecting campaign copy. So I think it's probably worth us touching a little bit on what does AI fluency mean. And before that, I believe we're going to put a quick pulse into here we go, I can see it popping up, just to see how confident people are when it comes to assessing AI skills. And there's three options: confident, not confident, or you don't assess for it at the moment.
One of the things we'll add as well is one of my favorite parts of the webinars we actually do is the Q&A bit towards the end. So if you guys haven't seen it yet, if you move your mouse towards the bottom of the screen, there's a little Q&A button. Please feel free to submit your questions. We can either go through them if they're related to what we're talking about as we're going through live, or we can do a Q&A towards the end. They're definitely my favorite bits, so make sure you do your questions in about what we're talking about.
Yeah, let's do it. And the harder the better. Let's keep Nathan and I on our toes. So let's chuck the questions into the chat. I can see one just coming. When it comes to AI fluency, I think it's just worth expanding on what that actually means. And really, what most companies want to understand is how can people use AI to become more productive and become more efficient. And there's different simulations that we see companies setting up for a candidate. For example, they may give a candidate a task that typically would take an hour to complete without AI, but only giving them 20 minutes to complete that task with AI. So you can now see how much more productive they can be. You can also understand how someone is able to bridge a gap in knowledge by having access to AI. So you may give someone a task that's slightly outside of their core area of expertise, and then see how they would use AI to bridge that gap. For example, you might ask a B2B content writer to create a B2C content campaign. We also see companies really interested in how candidates are prompt engineering. So how do they structure their prompts in a way to get a reasonable output from the model, but also can they spot where these models are giving bad information? And if so, how do they think around that? How do they apply judgment and critical thinking to get to a positive outcome? And we do have the ability, and Nathan, we've spoken about this before, but we do have the ability to poison the language model as well. So it purposely gives the candidate bad information, and then you can see if they spot that and how they think around that to get to the right conclusion, which is becoming super important to understand. We are looking at in the future bringing in tools that will help you evaluate how efficient somebody is when it comes to token utilization. I'm sure we've all seen the story about the company that spent about $500 million recently in a month accidentally on Claude. So this is something that's also becoming more top of mind for some of the customers that we're speaking to.
I think we'll definitely add about the poison thing. For those of you that have joined the webinars we've had before with Greenhouse and Team Taylor, I think some people have this assumption that I hate AI, which you'd be very surprised to realize I use it nearly every day, nearly all day. The thing, especially for assessments, that I think really important, what I really like about the whole kind of poisoning the well a little bit, is we have seen in our industry a massive influx of people being hired based on like AI answers, and then when you hire them and they come on site, you kind of very abruptly find out they don't actually know what they're talking about. And I think as recruiters as well, we've probably seen on LinkedIn, or God forbid, if you are on recruitment Reddits, I wouldn't recommend it. You see those videos of people with their phones up on next to their screen, so they have the AI giving them the answers right. And one of the main things about my opinion, and I think others similar to me, about the use of AI is using it to help you automate or help you speed up stuff you already know the answers to. So what the kind of poisoning the well bit a little bit kind of actually reinforces is you will quickly be able to monitor if the person being assessed actually knows what they're talking about, because they will call out the AI and be like, look, I just asked you to write some code for me, but you've written it in a completely different language, or you've written it in the wrong syntax, or if it's in marketing, you've done it in purple and I've asked you to do it in green. Like, if being able to call out the AI actually shows more AI fluency and understanding of AI and also their job combined, compared to people just using it to get through an interview, right? And that, I think, is quite a powerful tool, especially, again, having run interview panels in the past where there is a lot of AI being used by candidates. And there's also a lot of AI used by us in recruitment. And I think as much as we have to push to make sure we use it fairly, the caveat from that as well is candidates need to use it fairly as well, right?
100%.
Cool. I've got the responses to the poll if you want to hear them, Nick.
Let's go.
So out of the responses we've got, about confident was 33%. To be honest, is actually a little bit higher than I thought, especially with how AI is quite common, like it is quite new, these days. Not confident, 50%, which is what I kind of expected. Again, it is new. And then don't assess for it, 16, which is quite small. So I think that shows that a lot of people actually are thinking about it. And those that are thinking about it, a third of them or so are confident, and 2/3 of them are unconfident. Have you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think something that's interesting, particularly on the people who aren't assessing for it at the moment, is that these tools are evolving at such a fast pace, and companies are definitely looking to see how their teams can become more productive by utilizing AI. What we found is when you look across an organization, you may have someone in a random team, let's say in the finance team, who's just taken a real personal interest in AI. And for that reason, outside of work, they spent a lot of time self-developing and learning how to use these tools. And they've taken that knowledge back into the workspace and they've used it to create automation, workflows, and become much more productive and efficient. But you may also have other people in other teams who really don't understand what these tools can do. Maybe they look at ChatGPT as an enhanced Google search, for example, and they don't know the capabilities. What we're actually seeing from companies now is they're not only assessing potential new hires, but they're actually deploying skills-based assessments with their existing team to see where those gaps are, because there are blind spots at the moment to understand how much people understand these tools across different areas, and then they create L&D programs to get the team up to speed with how these tools can enhance their workflow so they get more productive. So where you're not assessing for these for new hires, I would also consider looking at assessing them for your existing team too, so you can ensure that everybody is utilizing these tools in a good way.
We've got a few little questions come through, and I think it's quite relevant to what we're talking about right now. So I think it might be worth going through this now before we kind of go into the demo towards the last part of it. So one of the questions that we've got is from someone asking, how do you score AI use fairly without rewarding over-reliance on the tool? What's your thoughts?
So yeah, so it's interesting. We actually can use AI to automatically score open text and video questions within the platform. I'll show you that when we jump in, but the human sets up the parameters. So you set the rules and you set how the AI works, and it's never a black box. So you will have the access to see why AI has come to a conclusion that it has. Then you can override that and change it if you choose to, and that's logged so everyone can see. When it actually comes to evaluating how someone has done prompt engineering or how they've utilized the tool, really the outcome will be clear if, for example, you've given someone a third of the time it would normally take to complete a task with AI. Well, did they complete the task, yes or no? Did using the AI allow them to be that much more efficient than they typically would be? So that would be quite clear when you're looking at that test report to review. And then where it comes to the AI scoring for different question types, that will also come down to you to set the parameters, but then to be that final decision maker.
I'd say as well, like scoring AI use fairly without rewarding over reliance on it, it is about scoring how the AI is used, right? Like I'm kind of using the question to give the answer there a little bit, but if you're finding that you've given an adequate amount of time to do the assignment, you know someone can manually write, just keep using the code example, because that's what I know a lot of people use, especially Claude code to help them out with writing. If you are finding that someone has an adequate time to do it manually and then they're doing it within 15, 20 minutes and just using the code and submitting it, like that probably isn't fair use of it. And you could also argue, and you'd want to have to review even more the actual quality of the code coming through, right? You can tell from prompts, especially if someone knows what they're talking about. For a sort of an efficient engineer, and these are sort of engineers that are being snapped up, especially in the market at the moment, are those that go, I can write this code in an hour, or I can write very quick and detailed prompt asking for exactly what I want. I can then get that code written. I can spend 5 minutes checking it, making sure it is actually what I would have written in the way I would have written it. And then I can actually move to the next task, right? So that's sort of that efficient coding usage. They can do it, but they're using the AI to automate that task for them as much as possible. Maybe they'll have to go and do some edits themselves. But it's not, I would say it's not going for people that are just using the AI. It's people that are using it in the right context to speed and automate what they're doing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We have another question, which is, what are you seeing as the biggest mistakes companies make when they first assess AI skills?
It's a very, very good question. I think really what this comes down to, especially when you're thinking about a job simulation, is mimicking the way that you would expect them to use AI in the role. So it becomes a predictor of their ability in that particular position if they come in as an employee. What I wouldn't recommend doing is just assessing someone's knowledge of particular language models. So, for example, theoretical questions about haiku versus sonnet within Claude's environment. I mean, it's not going to be super relevant to their performance or ability within the role. So number one, make it really, really more of a simulation. It could be you're hiring someone in go-to-market. You want to see how they would build out a prospecting campaign. They can use AI to do that. That's great. That's how they would use it if they were in the role. Secondly, I think sometimes companies will get really particular over the model that's being used rather than the skill itself of prompt engineering, critical thinking, and judgment. That's what I'd really focus on rather than the exact model, because a lot of these skills are transferable across Grok, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, for example, is important to mention too. So those are probably the main two that we see.
From like a business perspective, I would probably say set the assessment criteria the right way, right? You typically find that decisions on AI, and we're seeing this a lot in the market, is made very much from the top of the business down, right? So the board can be up and go, we can get X amount of efficiency of using AI, throw out there. Recruitment being a people function is very closely connected to the board, more so sometimes actually dev or marketing or just, God forbid, even finance, which kind of pays us all, but we're very, very closely knit to the decisions of the board, right? So recruitment tends to know about these initiatives maybe a little bit more before other departments of the businesses. So one of the biggest mistakes I see, and I have seen this actually happen quite a few times with companies that are adopting or being more acceptable for use of AI throughout the recruitment process from candidates is the recruitment team are on the same page, the board are on the same page, the hiring manager is not on the same page. Like if you especially got like an older guard sort of hiring manager who's very much manual, always needs over automation, I need my developers to start coding it, is actually sitting down with them to make sure they understand the criteria and why this decision's been made, and maybe asking them to look at their developers during the day and figure out most of them are actually probably using Claude or ChatGPT for about 60% of it anyway, right? I think it's very much we're moving into a new era, be it in the way that businesses are generating and running, but also how we're using it ourselves in recruitment is getting everyone on the boat as the boat's going on the journey, right? That would be my answer. Got another question here. You mentioned earlier productivity gains. So how are your customers measuring that in a hiring process, Nick?
Yeah, really simply. As I mentioned earlier, let's say on average it would take 1 hour to complete a marketing campaign build in a position without utilizing AI. You would give someone less time than that with AI. So maybe you would give them 20 minutes to complete it, but now they can use a language model to do so and they can use a tool. And you can then see, are they able to be more productive in a third of the time utilizing this tool? And if they're able to complete that task in that time, then great, you can see they're able to do that. Secondly, when they're doing the task, you can also review how they've utilized AI. So the full transcript of the interaction with the model is recorded. So you will see how reliant were they on the model? Did they just paste in the task and copy the text and bring it back in? Or actually, were they applying judgment? Were they applying critical thinking? Were they working with the model to expand their ideas, test their ideas, and come to creative outcomes or not? So you can review the output or the outcome they've got to, but also the full thread of how they got there with AI in the time that was allocated. The other scenario is giving someone something outside of their core area of expertise, like I said earlier. So you would be testing that knowledge gap, and to bridge that gap, critical thinking must be applied when it comes to prompt engineering, and someone must be able to push back on the models, and they must understand how to work around bad responses to come to positive outcomes, and you can review all of that too. Something else we always recommend doing in assessments, anytime you give someone a simulation where there's very much, I don't want to say an objectively right or wrong answer, but it's deterministic in the sense that you can see if someone's passed it or not. We recommend you follow that up by asking them an open text or a video question where they can explain their method, their reasoning, their approach, and how they got to the conclusion that they did in their own words. So you can really understand, okay, why did they take these actions? Why did they write these prompts? Why did they take these decisions when completing the task? So you get a full picture, not only of the work they did, but what was going on up here whilst they were doing that work alongside the model.
Awesome. I think we have time for like one more question before we go into the sort of the demo environment. So we've got, for teams that are not confident assessing AI skills yet, where do you suggest they start first? And how do you get your hiring team up to speed?
Yeah. Simply, I would start first by building out job simulation. So I would figure out, let's say you had a finance manager position you were hiring for. What are the key tasks in that position that are crucial that someone is able to execute? Build simulations around those tasks, and then give candidates access to utilize AI during those simulations. What you could do is speak to the hiring teams and say, hey, on a daily basis, how are you using AI in your role? How is it supporting you? How is it helping you? Where has it been useful to make you more productive? And then you can build that utilization into those simulations and allow the candidate to work with the models in those.
Completely agree. Start with what you know. Uh, Speak with the team. If it's a finance team and the team are using AI to help them with modeling or spreadsheets, for example, sit with the team and actually build a job simulation with the team. How do you use AI? Right? Like we need to make sure people can fit into what you're doing or innovate on top of what you're doing, but we need to know the baseline of what you're actually doing first, and then actually building a job simulation based on that. Again, it doesn't have to be a real life example if it's sensitive, for example, but it can just be working with that team rather than putting the weight on yourself as an TA, because we're not finance people, we're not developers, we're not marketers. We're kind of a lot of different things kind of combined into one is how I describe what I do. And maybe sometimes not even the hiring manager. If you've got an old guard hiring manager, they might not actually know exactly what their team do. They might not have been hands-on for 10 something years. If you're first trying to do it, you get a good gauge of having a comfortable start by actually including the team on it as well. And from there, it will grow and it will get better anyway. And with the right tool, which is obviously what we're here discussing today, you can iterate on that over time as well, improve it and improve it. But start with people that know what needs to be assessed, actually do the job, use AI in the job, for example, rather than trying to do what we're all very, very good at doing in recruitment, which is winging it. Like, for something like an assessment, we need to have a process in place, right? Cool. So that's the end of the questions we've got at the moment, Nick. Let's go and build a job simulation. That sounds fun.
Yeah, let's jump into the platform so everyone can see exactly what this looks like. Before I do that, actually, one thing I do just want to mention for everyone who is on the session right now, we are offering everyone a chance to have access to Canditech for a month, where we will work with you alongside our team to build out your own AI skill assessment. We've got an in-house test development team of PhD psychometricians who can work with you and support you, along with our library of over 500 sections and an AI assessment builder as well that I'll touch on today. But feel free to scan this QR code, and I do believe there will be a link in the chat as well, so you can claim this free month of access. If I come over to here, so Nathan, you can see my screen with the assessment window.
I can indeed. Lots of bar graphs.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah. So we have a lot of data in the platform. So people who like analytics, you would like Canditech. There's some high level data over here, but much more in depth analytics in another view, which maybe we'll touch on today if we have some time. I think what I'd love to focus on for anyone who, there'll be some people on the call who don't know what Canditech is. So I'm going to go through a very light overview. And as we go through this, you'll see where the AI assessments and utilizations really come in to the fold. And the place I'd love to start actually is with the candidate experience and what it looks like from their perspective, because I think that's probably the most important thing to consider when you're deploying these assessments. So I'm just going to load one up. One thing I'd mention is that candidate experience is also really important. So it should always feel very much like a candidate is coming into your hiring process. So it's always branded. Nathan, I've tried to find you in this video. I can't see you, but you may have been in the room behind the camera at some point.
I was up in Manchester the week before. I wasn't returning again. There you go.
Should have got the video from the week before. But yeah, you can fully brand it. Candidates get full instructions of what to expect. Of course, you can't talk about take-home assessments without talking about cheating. So we have a lot of proctoring, and we make candidates aware of that up front. Things like copy and paste detection, tab switching, IP address monitoring, webcam snapshots to make sure someone's independently by themselves taking the assessment and not doing things like this, taking pictures or looking to other devices or screens. Candidates will then see what's coming up in the assessment and what to expect. Really importantly, if somebody needs any assistive technology to help make the assessment more inclusive, they can self-serve and turn on an accessibility plugin with things like text adjusters, screen readers, just to make this much more inclusive process without having to raise their hand and ask for it as well. They can access this themselves. But what I'd like to do is I come into the assessment is show you an example of a job simulation. This will load in a second, and what you'll see is it says, hey, you're a data analyst. It's your first day on the job. You work at Salesforce. You've been given some marketing data. You need to go and review this, and you need to find out how we can optimize this campaign. This is work that someone who's applied in theory to a data analyst position should be very comfortable doing, because it's the sort of work they do all the time. So they can come into the sheet and they can start filling out all of their formulas, and they can work through these tasks. And if you give them permission to, they can deploy AI whilst they're going through this task. And on the right-hand side, I can open up ChatGPT and they can start working through it. And they could say, hey, if the daily budget is X, why am I not seeing whatever? And they can start working through this to understand what's going on. And this full transcript of this interaction is recorded for your team to review after the fact. And you would set how much time you're giving the candidate to complete this task. So that's what I mean by simulation. And when I said earlier on that we always recommend following up with open text or video questions, that would look like this. So you can now ask the candidate to explain their approach and how they got to the conclusion that they did, but you can do it in a creative way where you're not outwardly saying that. So in this case, we've said, now write an email to your manager with your insights and your suggested action items to improve the results. So this is the sort of work they'd still be doing in the role. So it's still very much within a simulation context for that position. But it's going to be very difficult for someone to explain in open text how they got to the conclusion they got to if they do not understand it because they were too reliant on the AI. They have to really understand what they were doing with AI in order to discuss it and talk about it in either video or open text. Secondly, if somehow somebody managed to cheat when it comes to this question, if somehow they bypassed all of our proctoring features, I have a very hard time explaining how they did that over here as well. So it does act as an additional proctoring layer that you can deploy.
I
Anything
think one of
on that,
the
Nathan?
things to mention here actually is kind of a question, actually, more so than me saying something. But for for an example case, right, that someone has been talking to ChatGPT in the corner about the spreadsheet that we see above, right, and they've got to the answer that they want. How would the system detect? So, for example, would you, as the creator of this assignment, would you expect the person to write that email manually, or would so what I'm basically asking is, would they be penalised if they asked the right questions to ChatGPT, they have given it what they want in the email, and then got the agent to essentially generate them an email for that? How would the system pick up on that?
But actually, I think that could be a great use of AI. Yeah, and it might be what you were saying. We were saying earlier about actually, simulating the role, how AI is used. In some positions, AI is simply used to help refine communication. And what's been really interesting with the introduction of AI, it's really shifted what skills mapping looks like for certain positions. So, for example, it may have been really important a few years ago that someone in finance or in a data analyst position has perfect written English communication. But now with AI, they can use the model to refine their communication. That is not an essential skill anymore, but their ability to use AI to refine their communication is a skill. So seeing them use AI to talk about their thinking, their process, and then say, hey, structure this in a way that's understandable to my manager as I share the results with them. That's great, So now you're really seeing how they would use AI on a daily basis.
I think as well, especially you see them correcting what the AI agents produce. Like that isn't how I would say this to a manager. Okay, we need to rework this or something like that. That then shows that they're actually aware of what they're supposed to be sending, right? So it wouldn't be penalization. If anything, it's the correct use of AI to automate a manual task that doesn't necessarily need to be a manual task, right?
100%. And I think sometimes people assume when you're talking about AI fluency or AI usage, it's at the really complex algorithmic or engineering, cursor type, vibe coding level. But really, AI can be used for email communication. It can be used for developing ideas for brainstorming and creative positions. Really, there's so many use cases that sometimes it's just interesting to give the candidate the model and see what they do with it during the assessment. And sometimes that might even give you ideas of how the team could be using it in their role as well. So that's also a little hack that's worth mentioning. I'll I'll move through this. We've of course got multiple choice questions that can be deployed. It's a great way to understand someone's got a basic foundational knowledge on any given subject. But also you can really customize assessments. So they really do mimic what you're evaluating or the position you're hiring for. In this case, we've got a video. Some companies will add sound clips, files, screenshots. We've got some companies hiring in their customer service team, and they've got this sound clip of a really unhappy customer. And the next question is, write an email to that customer responding to them. And in some cases, you might have them use AI to do that, to see how they would use AI to diffuse a situation like that. And then they can put their answer into here. Of course, we've got much more technical evaluations that you can run. In this case, this is a SQL question where you're looking at data. The candidate gets some instructions. They can then come into an environment and they can start running their queries. But someone who is much more proficient with SQL than I am could utilize AI in a really interesting way to come to building out these queries and coming to the solutions you'd require. And not only is this interaction recorded, but also the way they structure their queries is recorded pretty much keystroke by keystroke. So when your team are reviewing the query they input, they can see exactly how they got to their final query and how efficiently that was built, when they were working through this challenge. And you can have as many of these types of challenges in a section. And this is an example of a video question. So we've spoken about open text. This is now video, and the candidate can actually record a response talking about their approach, talking about their method. And where we use AI to automatically score open text and video questions, we do not give AI the video itself. We would only give AI a transcript of the video just to keep protected characteristics away. Things like gender, race, ethnicity to keep it really bias free and fair. But your team can always review the video. The candidate can actually record. If it's important to see how the candidate communicates, how they come across, you still have the ability to do that when you're reviewing their submitted test report. Any questions on your side, Nathan?
Not on this one. This will kind of make sense. I have one overall question. So, depending on how this simulation is built, so if it kind of, we've had a question come in from Jyoti, which we'll get to at the end, but that prompted my brain on this. So, some people are, let's put it this way, avoidant on AI. I'm going to use a bit of a stereotype here, but maybe older generation developers, right, that are a little bit more, it's going to take my job, which we are actually seeing in the market, right? However, for people like that are quite reluctant about using AI, if you are a very AI fluent individual, you're an AI fluent candidate, I'm less so because I'm more manual, and we both completed this assignment, how would our scorings rank up next to each other? Would my non-usage of AI give me any negative pointage towards the sort of assessment at the end, whereas yours will give you positives, or is it based on no, it's an equal footing, but if you use AI, we're going to add another scoring matrix on top, and then it sorts itself out?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because there's something in development called speed and time execution. And at face value, it may look like two people have come to the same solution, and they may have, but the way they got there can be completely different. For example, let's say we're both in London and we're both traveling to Manchester. You might decide to take a train, I might decide to cycle. Eventually, we will both end up in Manchester. It just took me a much longer time, and it was much more difficult and much more effort to get there. And we can actually use AI to automatically score how efficiently someone codes. So even if face value, it looks like they both came to the right solution, you would still be more inclined to bring someone into the team who can work really efficiently, really quickly, and really fast to solve a challenge, rather than someone who is doing everything very manually, and it might take them longer and it might not be as productive. I think that yes, there's definitely an element in some cases of people fearing that AI is taking over their role. It's not what's coming out in the data. It actually looks like more people are being hired at the moment due to AI. And I think probably a bigger something to be more concerned about is actually not enhancing your AI skills today is probably more risky than worrying about AI replacing you as an employee.
No, I couldn't agree more with the last point that you made. Times are changing. Um, People didn't like trains when they came out. Guess what? Trains came out. People didn't like cars. Cars came out. People don't like AI. It's here. There are already billions of investment on data centers. That money isn't just going to disappear, right? People want to
Yeah.
be able to utilize it. We've got about 10 minutes left. Should we go through to the sort of the creation of it so people can get a little view of that before
Yeah, so
we wrap
there's
up
a,
our
there's a couple of things that I'll quickly highlight. I'll just move over to this section because we do also do back-end development, front-end development challenges, and the candidate can utilize AI for vibe coding and things like that. But I do want to mention that we've recently released a couple of new features that really reflect the way the developers are working today, because it's massively shifted due to AI, and it's another great way to assess for AI fluency on the technical side. Currently engineers are in much more complex custom type environments, multi-file environments where they're using things like Claude Code, like Codex that can read and edit code based on natural language prompts. So we have developed new features that allow candidates to spin up a virtual machine within our platform where they have multi-file, where they have Codex. Claude Code is coming very soon. It's one of the number one requests that we get. And you can just say to a candidate, hey, you've got 2 hours, go and build an app that does this, or go and solve this problem in our code base, or debug this part of our product, and just let them do it. And that really is how they work today. So it's a really great way to simulate the position. And the other one I do want to touch on as well, very quickly, is live coding, which would look like this, where your team can actually come into an environment and they can set up a challenge. They would set up the challenge on the left-hand side when this loads. So they would write, today we will do X. Then they can actually invite a candidate into the environment, jump into video with them, and they can start working through a development problem together, utilizing AI, and they can also whiteboard and they can do system architecture design in real time. And it's just a great way for your hiring team to see and feel what it's like to collaborate with someone on a team and how they utilize AI in those scenarios. So I just want to highlight that as well, because I think it's a really important aspect of AI fluency. When it comes to building assessments, so there's a few things. So firstly, actually, we can use AI in such incredible ways that now you can just click use AI, create assessment with AI, and we've got our own language model, except for the outcome is you will have a fully built assessment and you would provide information to it. It will come back to you with suggestions on how to build an assessment. You can keep going back and forth with it. It will then build an assessment and you can still talk to it to edit it and change it. It's interesting. It used to rely on taking the input from the person and then going to our library of over 500 sections to find relevant sections from there to build an assessment. But sometimes it was a bit like putting a round peg into a square hole, particularly when you're talking about simulating positions across companies that could look very different, even if they have the same job title. So now it can autonomously create sections that do not exist in our library by itself. So you can get basically a customized assessment within 30 minutes of being briefed by a hiring manager without their active involvement. So it's a really great way to get started. We also have our library that's got over 500 pre-built sections in here that can be used as building blocks. And you can either filter based on job specific skills. We've got cognitive, things like core intelligence, critical thinking, personality tests, of course, AI skills, so AI literacy, all the way from basic to advanced, vibe coding, AI utilization in areas like sales, marketing, customer success. So really great ways to understand someone's foundation knowledge of AI. And if you then mirror that or add that to a simulation where they have to use it in a role specific way, you'll get some really interesting insights. But one of the easiest ways to navigate this is just by searching. So if I search for data analyst, for example, I can just pull up all of the relevant sections that relate to data analyst. If I could spell correctly, it would help. Then they'll come up. And if you want to use a section, you can click it, preview it, and then just add it into an assessment. But from here, you can edit it and change it and really do anything you want. And I do just want to show very quickly, we've only got a couple of minutes. I do want to show what it looks like to use the AI scoring. So if I go into an open text question, for example, to use AI to score it so your team don't have to manually review every single response, but also so you're not introducing so much subjectivity into the evaluation framework, you can either use a pre-built agent, and we've got 3 that look at language proficiency, basically in any spoken language on the planet, conflict resolution and objection handling skills, so really people-facing skills, and you can have a multitude of these on at the same time. Or you can build custom agents. And this is like saying to Canditech, this is what we expect to hear from the candidate's answer. And it might be, mentioned reviewing the report within 24 hours, right? That might be the first rule. And then you could add rule 2, rule 3, rule 4, and the AI will score against that. When you're reviewing the response, we won't have time to jump into that today. You'll see exactly why AI has come to a conclusion it has. You can change it, override it. It's logged so other humans will see. But it's a great way to reduce a lot of manual effort when it comes to reviewing assessments and candidate responses.
I think that's a really important thing to mention, and it goes to previous webinars as well. The AI is not making a decision; it is giving you answers to the questions you asked it to look at. Did they mention this for 24 hours? Blah blah. It isn't making a decision based on that, and these are things that you can model and change post fact as well. So it's not like what we hear a lot about candidates being afraid of, which is a robot just told them no and just declined them. That isn't the case. And very much the human in the loop sort of thing we hear about quite a lot on the market, but I've definitely seen this firsthand, the actual responses on it, and it's very much the AI is just going, you told me to look for X, Y, and Z. They didn't mention this, but there may be something when you review it, you're like, actually, they didn't mention that, but this is a little bit better. That's where the human loop comes in.
Yeah, exactly that. And I've managed to put up a very quick example. So you can see in this case, there were 3 rules set and the candidate didn't achieve one of them. And the AI explains why. They did achieve another. And one they didn't achieve, but a human overrode it and marked it as a good answer, which has informed it moving forward. And it's the same actually for this language scoring agent that was set. The AI actually found no mistakes, but a human, being me, adjusted it from a 5 to a 2, and that's then logged so everyone can see that. Any other human reviewer who's coming into this report. So, it's really important that you can always see how AI has been applied. And then, like you said, Nathan, that can be overridden by a human.
Amazing. So we're at time now. We do have a few little questions left. What we usually do is when we do the post email after the webinar, either myself or Nick, most likely Nick, since it's Canditech, they will come back with the answers to your questions in the email so everyone can see them as well. I would highly, highly recommend that people take up the free offer. One of the parts of my role at Scede was building out the partnerships, and having been in TA for so long, I knew a lot of these companies anyway, right? And when it came to assessment tools themselves is an absolute minefield, and I've used the vast majority. Again, I'm not going to mention brand names or anything, but I've used a lot over the many, many years. And we did speak to a number of those, but it was Canditech and seeing Canditech that really actually made me excited about the platform and its solving the things. And I know we touched on it briefly, but just the accessibility feature part on it itself. I know tools where if a person even uses a screen reader, maybe they suffer from a visual disability or something, they can't see well. A lot of these platforms actually automatically score down those candidates because they've used the feature that actually helps them to do the test of the stuff they would actually need in their work environment. And for those of you that have seen me on LinkedIn, I talk a lot about autism. It's I have Asperger's. My daughter has autism. Goes to an autism school. It's platforms like this with the accessibility is definitely where the market needs to be in the years that are coming up. And to me, as much as it's been the main focus point of our conversation today, this AI stuff's just the absolute creme de la creme on the top, the cherry on the top of it for me. So coming from a guy who's a little bit picky when it comes to software, I'm pretty well known for that. I absolutely adore Canditech. I highly recommend all of you take up on the free offer, have a chat with Nick and Nick's team and the customer success team, build out some environments for it. And I'm pretty confident you will be as impressed as I was.
Thank you, Nathan. And yeah, please do reach out to us. We'd love to work. We'd love to support you building out AI assessments. Yeah, so we can get you that 3 month and you can work with our team and we can help you get something live deployed that you can test with real candidates who are currently applying to your positions right now. So yeah, just drop us a note.
Hi, amazing. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always, Nick, having a chat with you. Here's to many, many more in the future. And everyone else, enjoy the rest of our, if you're in the UK, extraordinarily hot day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you, everyone.